right. Hello, everybody. I'm Tammy Divine. I am so excited to be here with you for another episode of Faithful Founders. This is the show from Divine Family Entertainment that allows us to highlight and feature Christian entrepreneurs who are out there pretty much doing business as mission. Sharing their love of Christ with their clients and customers and investors for startups and founders. And we also have the Faithful Funders show that we're going to be starting here pretty soon, where Christian investors will be able to come in and talk to us about what it takes for them to invest in a new business, in a startup, or in somebody's current business. Also, we're going to have faithful filmmakers, and that is about Christian filmmakers and TV show producers. All of these shows will be living on the Divine Family Entertainment platform when we launch, which I'm excited about. And I'll be keeping you up to date as to when all of that will be taking place. Today, I'm so excited to introduce you to Craig Tomanini. He is my new brother in Christ. And I'm so glad to have him on the show. Thanks so much for being here, Craig. I appreciate it.
Tammy, thanks so much for having me on. And yes, it's always good to have another sister. So
that's absolutely right. Your background is just absolutely amazing. I remember just a few days ago sitting there in your office, meeting you, getting to know you, and I am just like bawling and weeping as you're talking about your background. It is absolutely incredible. And just to give a little bit of background about you ahead of time, you've had 30 years in technology. You've been a rock star. You've, as a drummer, you have expertise in technology and business strategy. You are a sought after speaker. I mean, I can go on and on and on about your background, but you know, things didn't start out so good for you in your life, right? I'd love to hear your background because I think you're going to have people weeping along just like I was when we were talking.
sure, yeah, certainly not my intention to make people cry. However, I tell people before I came to the Lord, I wasn't really one to cry myself personally, and I feel like there was that softening of the heart, right, that we talk about, and I think he just kind of like squeezed onto it so tight that he was like, now you're gonna be emotional, right? So yeah, I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, actually in Worcester, Massachusetts, about 45 minutes west of Boston. I grew up with a single mother. She raised me completely by herself. My father, made a choice before I was born that he didn't want to be part of my life. He had already had 8 kids when my mother and him got together, and so she helped raise or finish raising those kids. But she wanted one of her own, and her story is really part of my story in a way because she went through so much, perseverance and like personal anguish, and she wanted to have one of her own kids, and she actually had 4 other pregnancies and a couple of births before I actually showed up. There were some stillborns, there were miscarriages, a lot of tragic things that happened there. And she persevered. She was told by medical professionals that she shouldn't have another baby, that it would probably kill her and likely kill the baby again. And she just, she didn't care, like she just wanted a baby. And she was so focused on that. I think, and of course, I don't know what happened exactly, but my father just didn't want to have anything to do with that. So there was some infidelity involved. They owned a business together themselves. My mother was very entrepreneurial in her own right. So I'm quite sure that that's where I got it from. But they got divorced when she was about 3 months pregnant with me. And I didn't realize until I was a little bit older kind of the magnitude of what had happened. But my mother and I had this great relationship where she would always, she would say, if you're old enough to ask a question, you're old enough to get an age appropriate answer, right? So she was always very transparent with things. And I think I was probably around 6 or 7 where I realized, of course, I didn't have a dad, and all of my friends had dads. And I asked her one day what had happened, and she was very candid. And there's a lot of detail there that I won't share, but he had a very difficult life of his own. He made some really poor choices, and so those things affected my mother, in her ability to try to raise me as a single mom. She worked really hard, 3 jobs most of the time, usually a couple of straight jobs, and then like always had a side hustle kind of a thing. So that's definitely where I got that from. It's how I grew up. And so I watched her just really work hard, but she struggled a lot herself, financially as we were growing up. She worked super hard in order to have the things that we needed, but she wasn't educated on how to really run a business, and she wasn't educated on things like finances and how to manage money and things like that. And so, of course, you are the product of your environment typically when you're a young child. And so I didn't get those things foundationally, but I did get the education of knowing that I never wanted to live that way myself. And so as I got older and started to explore the ideas of entrepreneurship, actually, I tell people all the time, at 13 years old is when I opened my first business. I wanted some money from my mother. She wanted me to explain to her why I needed the money, and so I had to tell her I was going to the movies with my friends, and she wasn't about it. She's like, we don't have extra money, And so, long story short, I went down the hill, and it was one of the first touchless car washes were being built, like the ones you see like at Loaf and Jug and stuff. And I asked the guy who owned the place if I could stand on the other side where the cars come out, because as the dryers don't do a good job of drying the cars off. And so I grabbed some T-shirts and a bucket, and I was just wiping cars down for tips. And as my story goes, I made $80 that Saturday, and then I went back every weekend for 2 years. And so my first business was like really successful. And we lived a really, I don't like the term poor, but I mean, we didn't have extra. We had what we needed, but we didn't have extra. And it manifested in a lot of ways growing up too. I had the sneakers that had, I can't remember if it was 3 stripes or 2 stripes, whatever it was that was uncool. Those were the ones I had. And then it seemed like when I finally caught up to the cycle and got the other ones, and they weren't cool anymore. And so I felt like I was always chasing this ball, and trying to be accepted and in the mainstream vein with my friends. My friends always seemed to have more than I had, and so there was a lot of things that I had to deal with growing up like that. My mother also lived a lifestyle that was now very culturally accepted, but she was a homosexual, and she lived that life for a lot of her own personal reasons. She had traumas in her young life and stuff like that. But I knew that she was that way. She had made that choice when I was like 9 years old. And so, not knowing any better, I'm talking about it like it was no big deal because it's my mother and I love my mother and I don't really care. But, the people in my circle, they were like, Craig's mom is gay, and like that was a huge social stigmatism that I threw on my own back. But nevertheless, my mother and I had this really super tight relationship all the way through our lives. So yeah, I mean,
and then from there, Craig, you somehow ended up in the military.
I did. Yeah. I went to a vocational school for high school, mainly because, like I said, we were, poor. And I knew that I wanted to have control of my own life. I knew at 13 when I took that first business endeavor on that I never wanted to really work for somebody. I just wasn't wired that way. And so I went to school for plumbing, and my thought was I was going to get educated as a plumber. Great trade, made really good money. I graduated second in my shop, and I graduated 30th in my class of over 2,000 people. So academically, intellectually, I had all the things I needed. But when I graduated in 1990, the new housing market, the construction dropped completely out. And so as a result, I wasn't able to get my journeyman's time in and get my apprenticeship and all my hours I needed to go and become a master plumber. So I found myself midway through my first, summer as a graduate from high school with all of the accolades and credits that I needed. but I didn't have the hours and things I needed to go to the next step. And so, because we were poor and I hadn't gone to a college preparatory school of any kind, I found myself in the situation going, well, I want to go to college, but we don't have any money to do that. We hadn't saved up or anything. So my cousin was a recruiter in the Army, and I went and talked to him, and I pretty much, I took the test, and I pretty much made the decision right there that I was going to join the military so I could go to school. And so I did that. So on July 16th of 91, I was sworn into the United States Army, and I did 10 years there, and became a military police officer. And my life took a very drastic, left turn, as I tell people. My mother was at one point in her life also in law enforcement. She was a Marine, and she was one of the first female Marines in the United States military. And she went that path of law enforcement, and I admired her, and so I followed that direction too. And towards the end of my military career, I went back to the National Guard because it was time to finally go to school. I had a deployment to Kuwait for 9.5 months after Desert Storm. And, my life and my thoughts and my perspectives and everything really just kind of changed. Everything got more broad. My vision was wider. Went home, met my now ex-wife, and she didn't want me to be in the military. So I decided to leave that. She also didn't want me to be a cop. I had become a civilian police officer. So I left that, became a medic on a rescue truck for a fire department, ended up getting stabbed in the back, literally on the job. So after all the years of law enforcement, never having an incident, I go and work a civil service job and I get injured. So I left that and made a very drastic career change at that point too.
And I was saying when we met and you were telling me this, I was like, that's love though, man. To give up what you're used to, what you enjoy doing because your spouse asked you to. That's a big deal.
Yeah, it was. I mean, at the time, yeah, it was easy. Like there was no hesitation. There was no sense of like, why would you ask me to do that? It was just a thing, right? So I just did it, and I took a job in a manufacturing environment which I hated, and the money wasn't half as good as it was with what I was doing before, but we were about to be married, and I wanted, it's that happy wife, happy life thing, right? So we did that, and then started making some really big changes, and ultimately moved to Colorado to be closer to her family. Her mom and dad and sister all lived here in Colorado Springs, and she wanted to be close to them. So yet again, I just kind of selflessly made a decision, left everything behind that I knew, and we moved to Colorado. And I don't have any regrets over that at all, because I love it here. And I had come here in the 80s, with my cousin was in the military back then, and he was at Fort Carson. And so I think I kind of knew back then I would end up here somehow. And so, that's a whole nother story, but that's, God doing what he does. Long before I was ever even thinking about him, he was thinking about me. And so, I came out and I did it, and there's all the reasons that I'm here. I realize those every day. Like, you start to go, why am I here? How did this thing happen? Why did I end up in this spot? And so those things, to me, that's the essence of life.
I want to make sure we don't gloss over what you just said, though. You said long before I was thinking about God, he was thinking about me. Yeah. Wow, that's a big statement. Isn't that how God works? Like, he knows us. He knows.
I mean, we belong to him, right? And I think a lot of people, well, it says in scripture that we all have God's word written on our heart, but it's that we've turned 180 degrees, intentionally turned in denial, and so we all know at the heart level that he exists. And I never grew up like in a situation where I was anti-God, or I was, an atheist or anything like that. Like I actually grew up around, the Catholic Church mostly. I was in a very Italian neighborhood. All my friends went to Catholic Mass, so I went to Catholic Mass. So I never had an issue with God. I knew he existed, but I never had, what I tell people now is I never had a relationship with God. And that's where things really turned in my life, was when I realized that God had been present. And then I was at this point again of making a decision, right? And an acknowledgement that, I couldn't continue to live the way I was living. And now I have the pleasure and the luxury of looking back, right? That hindsight is 2020. I can look back and I can earmark every single spot in my life where God was present, from the time I did the jump on my BMX bike and came down and ate the handlebars in my face and, didn't die, to the times when I was completely addicted to drugs and alcohol and, doing all these bad things. And there were moments where he saved my life, pulled me out where I should have been arrested or I should have been dead because I fell down, a flight of stairs or, into a huge pit, because I was walking around drunk in a field. Like, there's just so many spots where I can now look back and go, I'm only here because of him.
Let's talk about the drug addiction. When did that start?
So it's funny, a lot of people, generally speaking, they start doing the things, right? They get the tattoos and they start doing the drugs and, whatever, when they're young. I didn't have that. Like I told you, I went in the military at 19. I was, committed to a military service career for 10 years. I was married, we started a family. I never really took the time to do the things. So all of this manifested when I was 31 years old. It was right at the end of my first marriage. When we got separated, I felt like the world owed me something, right? Like and I'm not a believer at this point, right? So I go out and I'm in a rock and roll band. I'm playing drums for a band, and we got signed to a couple of independent record deals, and then ultimately to Sony Latin America for a short period of time. And all of that happened right around when I turned 31, and I had gotten separated, and I was going through a divorce, and it was really messy. And I was trying to own my part of all of that. But what I kept coming up with was this idea of, you're a failure. Like, everything you've done up to this point, it doesn't matter. And now you've screwed up this thing too. And I combated that thought by simply saying, you know what? I'm going to do what I want to do. I've never done what I want to do. So I went out with my band, and I remember very clearly the first time we were at a pre-Sturgis biker rally here in Colorado, and they had all these little travel trailers set up around the rally, and we were playing, we were performing with the band. And I remember all these little trailers had whatever drug you wanted. You could literally walk into one of these trailers and you could do cocaine, or you could, crystal meth, or you could get weed, or you could get heroin, or whatever it was that you wanted, whatever your pleasure was. Wow. And I remember thinking to myself, you know what? I'm going to go do cocaine. I've been watching my bandmates do it for years, and they got their stuff on point. So, it doesn't seem to affect them in any way. And I deserve it. I'm going to go and get it. So I walked into this one little travel trailer, and this big gnarly biker guy was in there, and he was chopping up what I believed to be cocaine. That's what it looked like. And he gave me a $50 bill, and I sat down and I did my first line, and I walked out of that trailer. And it's not funny, but it's amazing that I didn't die. But I went back to the band, and my face was on fire, like it was burning. And I was like, this can't be like what I've seen other people experiencing. This, something's wrong, And so I went to my guitar player, and I'm like, hey man, I'm worried, like, and I'm starting to get panicked, like I'm breathing heavy, and like my heart's racing. And he says, bring me back to where you went. So I bring him over. Well, long story short, I wound up snorting probably about $60, about 4 grams of crystal meth, pure crystal meth. Wow. The very first time I did drugs. Probably should have killed me, right? My heart is just banging out of my chest. I was awake for 3 days after that incident. And you would think that I would just not want to do anything like that again. But the very next weekend, we went out, we played some more shows. I think we were on the road. We did a short little regional thing, and somebody put some really nice cocaine in front of the band. Wow. And I did my first line of cocaine for the first time. And it was so different in contrast to what I had done the first time. It was smoother and all of that. And I liked it. And I was instantly, and I'm using this word differently, I was addicted to it because it kind of met the demand of what I was looking for. It was quick. It numbed things out. It didn't seem to affect my ability to do things. In fact, I was kind of more energetic and stuff. But then I started doing it more often, and alcohol became a counteracting supplement to it. So I would get really, really high, and then I would drink about a half a gallon of Jack Daniels. And then I
Wow.
would get really, really drunk, and I would do some more cocaine. And I was on that pendulum for 5 years. And in between, I was doing all kinds of other things.
And ultimately, it's an escape, right?
Oh, it was totally an escape. I mean, it was as much of a therapeutic, I use the word numbing, right? Because I'm trying to forget and not feel, as my tattoos were. I mean, I got all my tattoos. I would sit in the chair for a tattoo for 6 hours, 8 hours on end, because I would rather feel that pain than everything else that was going on in my body. I know that now. Then I didn't know why I was doing it. I was really on a mission to destroy myself back then because I just felt like such a failure. And there was no way that I was going to come back from that. I was going to be stuck in this spot forever.
Yeah. And so, thankfully, we have a God who's a redeeming God, that no
Yeah,
matter whatever situation that people find themselves in, there's nothing that's so horrifying to God that He's going to be like, no, no, I can't save that person.
absolutely.
Can you tell us about the path to redemption for you?
Yeah, I mean, so he's also got a sense of humor, right? Knew for years that he wasn't going to get through to me, and so there was this one thing, well, two things, but one thing specifically that he knew I would pay attention to, and that was music. I mean, I've been playing music since I was 12 years old, professionally since I was 14, with different bands. Um, and so what happened was, and the second thing is, I was playing a gig here locally in Colorado Springs shortly after I got divorced, and I walked in and we were setting up, and there was this beautiful woman behind the bar. She was helping her friend bar back that night. It wasn't like she didn't work there, but we made eye contact while I was setting up and stuff. And I went over and talked to her, and we just had this like instant connection. And we knew that something was going to happen, that we were going to be friends at a minimum and probably something more. But I was so messed up. I immediately threw up this wall and I tried to keep her at arm's length away because I knew that with what I was doing, whatever she had going on in her life, I would destroy that. And I told her that. I'm like, I can't get involved with you. I like you, and you're a great person and we definitely hang out and stuff like that. But like, I didn't want to pull her into my world. And she kind of, interjected herself here and there. And long story short, we wound up, realizing that there was feelings there, but I was so lost on my journey, touring. And I remember she came over one night and she said, because we would have dinner together every once in a while, and she said, I really care about you, and I feel like, you feel the same way, but there's so many things preventing us from getting together. And she's like, but I can't put my life on hold. So whenever you're ready, call me. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I left a couple days later for a tour for 11 months. I was gone, and we had just signed with Sony, and I was on the road, and we did a whole tour through the Pacific Northwest, and we played with all these other bands. But on the way back, I had these I wasn't sober, but I had these little moments of clarity. And I started to feel how I felt about her. And it started to really impact the level to which I was trying to destroy myself, if that makes sense. Like I was still drinking and drugging, but I wasn't doing it as much, right? It's because I think I was trying to catch some more of those moments, and have cognitive memory of that. So anyways, I write a song, because I'm a musician. So I write a song for her, professing my love. We recorded on the road as a band so I could come back and play it for her, and I want to profess my love. And I've pulled my head out of my orifice and I'm ready to go. Right. And so I call her up when I get back and she's like, I've been dating this guy for like 5 months.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, cool. Click, hung up the phone. For about the 5th time in my life in that 5-year period, I went to try to kill myself.
Wow.
And this is where it's one of those moments, like this is where I know God was in control as usual. I pulled out my 45. I racked around into the chamber. I put it in my mouth and I squeezed the trigger. And clearly it
Wow.
didn't go off.
Wow. That how miraculous. That is
Yeah, it
miraculous.
is. It was. It is. And about 4 or 5 days after that, I guess. I mean, we always argue about the timing. I'm bad because I was so messed up on the drugs. But at some point, shortly after that incident, I remember she called me and she said, James called or texted or whatever, broke up with me, and she's like, so you got one shot. She's like, don't screw it up.
And that's
So
so amazing and incredible to me, Craig.
yeah,
I don't, not to break up the flow of what you're saying here.
no, totally.
Could you, you're alive to imagine what you would have missed out on.
Yes,
God
yes,
allowed that bullet to pass through the chamber.
right. It would have all just been done. And there were several times before that too, but yeah, the significance and the timing of her, responding and the orchestration with James. I mean, poor guy, because she's an amazing woman, and I don't know him, but it would have been good for him if he was able to. But somewhere in the mix of all that too, God said, "You're not the person for her. This loser is the person for you." Right? And that was just the beginning of it all to the redemption part. So remember I said there was two things. She was one of them and the music was the other. And she said to me, because we started dating with intention, I was never one to, as my mother would very candidly say, why buy the cow when you can have the milk for free? I wasn't that kind of a person. And I was like, we're going to date and we're going to get married. And that's just the way it's going to be, because I'm not going to take the chance of losing you again. So we started looking for a house. She had two daughters that were, preteens. I had a daughter who was a little bit younger from my first marriage. We asked all the girls if they were okay with us getting married. Like, we asked them for permission. They lovingly and excitedly said yes, which was amazing. And then we started looking for a house. And she made this one comment to me, Tammy. She said, my family and I, the girls and I, we're Christians. Like, that's how I grew up. And she's like, and I just want you to know, because I don't know where you're at with that, but I had talked about like my Catholic upbringing and stuff. She's like, so I feel like it's okay. She's like, but I just don't know where you're at. She's like, but we go to church. That's what we do on Sundays. And I was like, okay. Like, again, I wasn't opposed to God. So I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I can't go to church. The roof will crumble in if I walk in the door, like, it wasn't like that. So I start going to church every Sunday, and this timetable is super wonky and fast, but like, we start going to church. I walk in the first couple of times, and I share this with you too. I was really drawn to the band, to the worship band that was there, because I'm a musician. And I remember talking to one of the guys there who ended up being one of the elders in the church, and he was playing guitar. And I went up to him after the service. I said, wow, like, you guys are really good, And I said, I would love to sit in with you guys. He's like, oh yeah, I heard you were a drummer, a really good drummer. And I was like, yeah. I'm like, so yeah, we should set that up. And I'm thinking it's just like, it's a gig, like, let's get into it. Let's jam. And he looked at me and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, but how's your relationship with the Lord? And I was like really offended by it for some reason. And I went home and I remember telling Melanie, I said, she's like, I saw you talking to Garrett. And I was like, yeah. She's like, how'd that go? And I was like, I told him I play drums for the band, because like they need some more drummers. And he asked me how my relationship with Jesus was. I'm like, he's kind of an asshole, is what I said. And she was like giggling, and she's like, because I think she knew at that moment that God was kind of grabbing down, like that was his way. I think she knew. I had no idea. And then over the subsequent months, I started hanging out with some of the guys in the church. One in particular asked me to go to coffee with him on a Thursday. And so we did that. And then we did it again the next week, and we did it again the next week. And he wasn't like thumping me with the Bible or anything. He was just building a relationship with me, because I didn't have a dad, I felt like this was really the first man in my life that ever really poured into my life, like showed me true love, So we're sitting there having these great conversations every Thursday, and time is going by. And I start to feel some things churning. And he hits me this one night with this challenge. And he said, look, he's like, I don't expect you to adhere to this as a standard, because I know that you're not a believer. But, the book that I read, and he pulls out the Bible and he goes into James and he says, it says that if something is sin and you remain and you know it and you remain in sin, then it's a denial of Christ. And I was like, yeah, that's logical. What's your point? And he's like, well, my point is, even though you're engaged to be married, and you're going to get married in July. So like right now it's, late March maybe, or early April. He says, I just want you to consider this, because even though you're not a Christian, your wife and your two soon-to-be stepdaughters are. And you're compromising their values and their principles. Your soon-to-be stepdaughters are watching you shacking up with their mom, right? Even though you're intending to get married, right now you're not. And he's like, think of the example that sets for all three of your daughters. Like,
Wow.
would you want some dude shacking up with them, right, if they weren't married? And it hit me. Like, I was like, okay, I received that, but like you said, I'm still not a Christian. But I was like, okay, I'll consider it. So I go home that night. I talked to Melanie about it, and I was like, yeah, I'm like, Scott hit me with this thing, and she just kind of was like, so what are you going to do? Like, she didn't say, oh my gosh, what a jerk, or like, she was like, so what are you going to do? Like, she started to develop an expectation, I think, of, how it talks in scripture about the man being the leader of the household, right? And having those things in order. And I was like, I said, I don't know. I said, I don't know if I'm supposed to do anything, and I don't know what I should do. And she's like, we'll go to coffee with Scott again on Thursday. So I went to Scott, on Thursday, and we talked about it. I said, hey, I've been thinking about the thing that you brought up, and I said, I'm not really sure exactly how to react to it or what I'm supposed to do, but I want to, I want to do the right thing, but I don't know what that is. He's like, great. He's like, so let's go deeper. He's like, I have a barn. He lives up in Monument. He's like, I have a barn and I have some alpacas, and there's an apartment above the barn where the alpacas sleep. He's like, you're more than welcome to move in there. And I was like, I just bought a house. I'm unpacking my stuff. I'm not moving up to your barn with your alpacas. Like, so now it's like mid-April. It's like April, I'm going to say like the 17th or something, right? So I go home and I'm like, he wants me to live above his alpacas. And she's like, so what are you going to do? She says again. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, we just bought this house. We got all this stuff to unpack. The kids are here. Like, it's all new. Like, we got to figure out all the things. And she's like, okay. So I go through the next week. I go back and I meet with Scott one more time. And he's like, so what did you decide? And I said, I don't know, man. I said, I'll let you know by the weekend. He's like, okay. So we go to church on Sunday. It's like April, I'm going to say it's like the 19th or something. I'm sitting there in the service, and we're in Acts 16, and we're going through the story about the Philippian jailer and the earthquake, and how Paul is singing and worshiping and praising to the other prisoners, and the jailer falls asleep, and the earthquake happens, and the jailer jumps up, and he's worried because he thinks he's going to be executed because the prisoners escaped. He runs around the corner, and he sees Paul and the prisoners worshiping and praising the Lord, and he says, what do I have to do to be saved? And that was like a 2x4. Because I think that was the first time I heard and asked that question of myself. What do I need to do? And the answer was, you just simply have to believe in Christ and Him crucified. So after that message, the worship team fires up. Scott happens to be a guitar player, and he's leading worship that particular Sunday. And he stopped in the middle of the worship set, and he said, I feel like there's somebody here that doesn't know the Lord, that needs to hear what Paul talked about in this message today. And he said, so I'm going to ask everybody to bow their heads and to pray. And when we pray, if you hear this prayer, it wasn't the sinner's prayer. It was just him praying, and reinforcing that it was just simple, that you could just believe. And he said, if you make this your prayer, if you hear this, then just look up at me.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you right there, because I think we just need to be clear on this. The Lord has just touched your heart over the story about the jailer. The worship band starts playing, and in the middle of a song, The worship leader, your
Uh,
friend, the drummer,
he's
stops.
he was a guitar player.
Oh, he was a guitar player.
Yeah.
He stops everything. Like he felt that
The Holy Spirit.
something had
Yeah.
moved,
Yeah.
something had changed,
Hmm.
and this is not a normal thing.
No, in fact, that church, we never do altar calls. Like it's just not it's not a part of our, uh, I mean, certainly we don't not believe in altar calls. I'm not saying that, but we just don't do them. Like it's not part of the service typically, right? Like we don't have moments where we just do massive altar calls and everybody rushes to the front. I mean, it was a church of 150 people, so it was it's a one-room schoolhouse kind of a church. And so, yeah, it was very out of the ordinary.
And so when he said, "Just look up," what happened?
So I remember, and again, I don't know if this is really what happened, but I remember, I had my head down, of course, and my eyes were closed. And I remembered first looking over at my wife. And of course, everybody had their head bowed. Because I kind of thought, like, is this a trick? Like, I like it was uncomfortable almost. Like I had, bowed my head and prayed a million times up to that point, because of the times I've been going to the church. But I don't know. I guess I guess I felt something, and I don't really know how to explain it even today. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is real. Like this is actually happening. Like I became very aware, and the words that had been just preached or taught were really like just like penetrating into me. Like I don't even know what the right. I guess the word is comprehension. Like I understood it for the first time. Like it made sense. I have read the Bible hundreds of times throughout my life, in the military, when I was in the Catholic Church. I mean, my grandmother, when she passed away, she gave me her Bible. God, right? Like this is God. Like this is from your grandmother. You should take it. Throw it on a shelf, right? But now, this one time, at this one moment, I'm fully aware, and so I guess I raised my head because I felt conscientious of what was happening, and I didn't necessarily know that it was directed at. I don't know if it was directed at me or not, but I remember looking up, and he wasn't even looking in my direction. He was looking on the other side of the sanctuary, and all of a sudden he just turned his head over, and we made absolute eye contact. This part's in question because I now, as a more mature Christian, I think what I actually heard was God. I don't know. But he looked at me, and I thought at the time what happened was he looked at me and said, "Really?" And that was it. I mean, it was like, and I was like, "Yeah." And then he went back to playing. The service ended, and him and a couple of the other elders took me aside into one of the community rooms and explained what had happened.
Wow.
And so, I mean, like, just that, I mean, that was, obviously the point of justification. They asked me very specifically in the room, so you're accepting Jesus as your Lord and Savior. And I said, yeah. Like, if it's that simple, if all I got to do is say yes to what's being asked of me, then why wouldn't I do that? Naive, right? I mean, naive as a new Christian as I could possibly be. So that's like the 19th.
That simple. That is
It
that.
is. It is that simple. And if and I always do this when I get asked, if you're watching this and like you don't know, get with someone who can explain the gospel to you, because it is super simple. And you really have to ask yourself the question, why would I deny that in my life? Because the alternative certainly is worse. I was living the alternative up to that moment. The drugs and the alcohol, the sinful behavior. I mean, I could go on for hours, Tammy, and talk about my pornography addiction and all the things that I've overcome because of my relationship.
The alternative behaviors and activities are worse, but also the alternatives in religion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the alternatives say you got to work to be saved. You got to do X, Y, and Z. You can't drink. You can't, do drugs. You can't be promiscuous. You can't do all of these things, or you have to light candles or you
Right.
have to pray X times a day,
Right.
right? The alternative in religions is there's stuff, so much stuff you gotta do
Yep.
to be
And
saved.
I think that that's one of the biggest blocks for people is that's what they know, right? That's the point of reference, or at least it's the stereotype of religion, of organized religion, and people hear and see that and they go, I'm not going to do that. Like most people won't brush their teeth every day or after a meal when they eat a meal because it's just too much work. So now you expect them to go and completely radically modify their life and their behaviors in order to accomplish something that might be true, right? Because there's still that aspect of it for a lot of people to believe if he's actually really there, if he exists. Now, you and I know that he exists, right? But for people that are exploring the idea of it, it comes down to one word, and it's such an easy word, but it's such a hard word, and it's just simply faith. You have to have faith,
Absolutely.
faith of things unseen. Hebrews 11, right? You have to be able to understand that there can be and there is something more powerful than you. Just look around and you'll realize in the creation itself that there's no way that this stuff just instantly showed up. Somebody that has supernatural powers did this.
An intelligent designer. Everything
Right.
else is by design. Everything that we see around us,
Yep.
um, a
And
human,
that
and
same person
somebody
stuck
put
his
us
finger,
together.
right? That same person stuck his finger in the chamber of my gun that night too, right?
Wow.
Full circle.
Right. And
Well, yeah,
we're at this point where the Lord has spoken to you. You have accepted Him as Lord and Savior, and you know that you got to do right. You got to do the right thing. So there's a
yeah,
choice before you now, which
yep,
is move out of the new house that you just bought for
yep,
your new wife and daughters, or for your girlfriend and her daughters, and for your daughter, and
right,
live above the alpacas.
right.
Or is there another path here?
There is another path, and so met again with Scott. Decided that I was going to throw away the deposit on the hotel where we were going to have the wedding in July. And now, as my birthday is approaching this very same weekend coming up, I decide I'm going to have my birthday and I'm going to get baptized. And you know what? Let's just throw a wedding on top of it. And so I got baptized on the 20th of April, the very next day. I
Nice.
got had my birthday, or we got married on the 21st, and I had my birthday on the 22nd. And so I
Wow.
didn't end up moving above the alpacas. I just said, and I had to really work. I had to really kind of beg Scott because there's premarital counseling and things like that that you need to do. And he was like, "Well, I can't marry you until you get the stuff done." And he's like, "So in the meantime, you got to live above the alpacas." And I was like, "I'm like, no, 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 no. Like, I'm a business guy. Let's negotiate. Like, I'll sign an agreement or whatever you need. We'll come do the marriage counseling after we get married, but we got to get married this weekend." And so he agreed to that, and it was really beautiful because we did it in my mother-in-law's living room. It was super personal. It was just my wife and I, our three kids, my mother, her mother and father, stepmother and father, and Scott. And Scott really beautifully explained to our kids, he spoke directly to them and said, they're doing this, Craig is doing this because he wants you to see a Christ-like example of what it means to be in a relationship, covenantally and according to God's design and in marriage, and to set that example for you guys. And it was beautiful because, now those same three daughters have all gone on, to become adults. One of them is married, has given us two beautiful grandbabies. And, the other two are in their career paths. And one just graduated from college a month ago, and she's going to be a teacher in the fall. The oldest daughter has been a medical assistant for 6 years at an allergy clinic. They're all on the right track. They're all God's part of all of their lives. They are beautiful children, wonderful daughters. And I have to believe that, of course, all the credit to God, but I have to believe that doing the right thing in that moment or not could have completely changed the outcome of their lives, not just our lives, but their lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. What a beautiful example, and it's so great that your friend pointed that out. So this is your happily ever after moment. But in real life, not in fairy tales, things don't stay so happily ever after. And there was a point that you kind of went downhill again, right?
Yeah, yeah. Shortly after we bought the house and got married, um, we had a New Year's Eve party. So I had left my band, and we were not touring together because I couldn't be around that environment. I knew that that was dry. I had given up the drugs. That was all God. I had I had stopped drinking, I would say, to some extent, but we had this New Year's Eve party, and of course, my brilliant idea was, hey, let's invite all of your old musician friends over to the brand new house with, your new wife, and let's have a party. And I relapsed. I drank 3/4 of a gallon of Jack Daniels that night in about, it was less than 4 hours, I think. I don't
Wow.
remember a whole lot of the night, to be honest, but I woke up the next afternoon to my very new wife and my mother, who had just moved in with us after she retired. And they were both sitting at the kitchen table, and my 45 was on the table, and what was left of the Jack Daniels was sitting there in the bottle. And my wife, very candidly, she was like, "One of these things has to go because I can't ever go through what I went through like last night." And I didn't remember. Like, I had no idea what I had done, but apparently, at some point, I went up and got my gun and got into this really depressed state, like I usually do when I was drinking. And I went out to the garage and stuck the 45 in my mouth again. And my wife walked out into the garage to get something out of the refrigerator for the party. And when the light from the house kind of shone down towards the end of the garage where I was standing, she saw me standing there with the gun in my mouth,
Wow.
and she didn't know what to do. Never been in that situation before. And so she went in and got my mom, and my mom came out and disarmed me because she's a badass, and cold cocked me and took the gun away. And that explained why I had a sore jaw that afternoon. And I basically was given this opportunity to make a decision. And I love my guns, and I pushed the bottle of Jack Daniels away. And it's been 14 years since I've had a drink, of liquor. And I just, it's that example of where God can redeem all areas of your life if you allow him, if you invite him to take that stance. If you pray and ask for those things, he'll remove those things from your life. He has that ability. But that night was, yeah, it was definitely one of my lower points in life because I had so much to lose at that point, and I had given my life to the Lord, and I was trying to walk that out, and I was a very new Christian at that moment. So I struggled with a lot of the how comes and the what ifs and why did this happen? What's my purpose? And that set me on a trajectory for everything else that I've been doing at this point. And so I really just jumped into the kind of the deep end of the pool, so to speak, when it comes to my relationship with him.
And wow, doesn't it go to show also that um, when you have a problem with drugs and with drinking, things can devolve really fast if
Yeah.
you relapse.
Yeah. You're giving up control. If you're struggling with those kinds of things, I would tell you that that's absolutely what's happening is you're giving up that control of your life. And it's a different relinquishing of the control, because when we become Christians, we trust and give control to God to control our lives. But when you do those things and you counteract that, you're resisting, you're again turning away. And that's, I explain to people, you're either looking to the right or you're looking to the left. And when we turn one direction away from Christ, we are denying Christ. And when we talk about repentance, right, as a mechanism, as a practical thing, again, not being works related, but repentance literally means to turn 180 degrees away. So wherever you find yourself, if that's not the direction you're supposed to be going in, literally repenting and saying, you're saying, refocus my attention 180 degrees away from what I'm doing right now. And I think that that's, from a practical standpoint, I think that's important to understand, not just in addiction and things like that, but in life, right? If you're in a situation that's not, adding value to other people's lives, to your life, it's not edifying, glorifying to God, then you need to repent. You need to turn and look in the other direction. And repentance isn't a dirty word. It's not like it's bad to repent. Like, we have to do it constantly when we sin, because we sin constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And thankfully, he's understanding and forgiving. And all it takes is asking, right? Getting
Yeah.
on our knees, being in his presence and asking. And yeah, there are things that we're all constantly having to work on. And thankfully, He is God and He is forgiving. So let's get into the business part.
That's it.
Yeah, how did we get to ask Craig T?
So I'll try to give the abridged version. I was involved in a network marketing company, started in 2016. I had a health struggle that I was trying to get through. I had gone up over 400 pounds. And so I jumped into this organization that had some really great products. I had a massive transformation very quickly. In 13 months, I lost over 160 pounds of weight and got my life physically back on track. And at the same time, my son, my one and only son, so I have 4 daughters now. She and I have a daughter together, and then we had a son. My son was in utero when I was around 43 years old, and I was on the precipice of dying. So it's like I did all these drugs and all this drinking, and then I quit so that I could blow up like a blimp and die from, diabetes and high blood pressure or have a heart attack or something, right? So, which were all possibilities at that point. So I'm on this webcast one day, and I'm talking to this guy, and I had been sharing that story with people through the network marketing company. I had developed a presence on social media, and then I was like, I got to talk about this somehow. And I wrote a book, my first book, called The Power to Change, A Christian's Walk Through Darkness to the Light. And it was just everything I just shared, right? My testimony. And then this guy got a hold of it along with several other people. And he said, hey, I would like to have you on a show like this. And so I went on, and it was him that actually kind of branded me. He said, so people read your book, they found you on social media, and then they just asked Craig T questions. And because my last name is Tomanini, and then you met with them and you talked about whatever you talked about. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty much it, So it was him that kind of gave me the Ask Craig T brand, or the name, if you will. And following up to that, I changed my social media presence to use that as a brand, because I thought it would be good to, delineate between my personal profile and like the people that I was sitting down with. And one day I was in a coffee shop, and I was talking with one of these people that I had met through social media. And one of my friends kind of looked over his shoulder. He's a coach as well. And he said, hey, are you coaching people? And I was like, no, I'm just talking. He's like, you should coach people. He's like, I've been listening to you, all the people you've been talking to. And so I eventually went and took an online class to become a certified life coach, got the framework that I was looking for, but I really didn't want to be a life coach. Nothing against life coaches. I have one, and we need them. But from a business standpoint, I was thinking, God, what are you doing here? And I felt this call to help people, but I didn't want to do it through life coaching specifically. So I started thinking, well, what kind of a coach would I be? Well, with all of my entrepreneurial experiences throughout my life, I was like, a lot of people need help structuring businesses, like how to set it up, and then with my background in IT, over the last 25, almost 30 years, I realized that I had a lot to offer people in terms of technology. So the technology business coach was born. I just a couple of years ago formally moved into an office space, started really intentionally focusing on my business. And that's kind of where I'm at now, is growing the team, expanding the mission. So
just real quick, I don't want to gloss over your technology background.
I'm watching the clock. We can stay on longer, but I just want to make sure I'm respectful.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Do we need to wrap up soon? Do you have a meeting, or
no? I do not. So
okay, good. Because
let's get into it. Okay.
Just give a little background of how deeply you are into technology, because it's impressive.
So I started, like I mentioned, the manufacturing job. I couldn't stay in that job very long for a lot of reasons. I bid on a job in the front office of that company, but in order to get that job, you had to have this like bleeding edge certification. At the time, you may have heard of it, Windows 95. And so I went and I took this like comprehensive course, and I got certified in Windows 95, which just basically meant I knew how to log on and use the user interface, because that was all brand new, the visual part, right? And so eventually that evolved into Windows 98. And then Microsoft came out with this program called MCSE, a Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer. I went through that program. I was one of the first MCSEs in the world to be certified through Microsoft, probably one of the first couple hundred, I would say. So I got that endorsement. And then that was right around the time that we moved to Colorado. And so I came here to Colorado and I got a job with a startup company that actually was the first web-based email company. So everything you guys know about Hotmail or Gmail or Yahoo Mail and things like that, this company pioneered the technology behind it. It's called a mail engine and kind of how it all worked. And they actually backed up, if you're old enough to remember Netscape Navigator as a browser, they were the Netscape webmail backend. So I worked at this company. I got hired as a customer service manager. They had a call center that basically was a folding table and 3 touch tone phones. And people would call in through the trunk lines and you'd answer the phone that was in front of you and you help the customers the best you can. And most of the customers that called in were calling because they had the webmail client, that they were using, and they didn't know how to do this. They didn't know how to do that. So I got that job. I was the 43rd person hired to that company. I love the culture because it was so startup, ping pong tables and foosball tables. And, Fridays they had, which, back then I totally took advantage of. They had kegs of beer on Friday afternoon. So people would work into the evening, and it was really like, kind of Google kind of culture back then. And you could do anything you wanted in the company. The CEO used to say, if you want to be the janitor, you can be the janitor. If you want to be the president for a day, you can be the president for the day. We'll see how it works. So anyways, I took that and I kind of got my call center built up. I brought it to a couple hundred people, implemented some technology at that level for like ticketing systems and things like that. He took notice. A couple other people took notice and asked me if I wanted to go into a corporate training position. And in the military, I had done instructional design, so I was not unfamiliar with that particular area. And they wanted me to specifically train new call center reps that were coming in. So it was kind of relative to what I had been doing. In that role, I learned more about the technology, the mail engine from an IT perspective, right? From a ones and zero perspective, because I started training the sales force as they were growing the company to learn how to go out and sell the technology to other bigger companies. So we were going after large enterprises. So I learned a lot about the technology through that. And then a job opened up in the IT area for a web development programmer. And I had been messing around personally with a little bit of PHP and Cold Fusion. And those types of things allowed me to have a base skill set that was attractive to my new manager. And side note, I was also running a web-based web design company personally with a friend of mine who worked at that same company. If you guys are familiar with the NORAD Track Santa site, have you ever seen that? We put that on the internet the first year with the Air Force, and we worked with AOL, and that was off to the side. So I'm doing this work.
And your side hustle was doing the NORAD thing.
That's right. As I have a picture of, I don't know if I should have showed you the picture when you're here. I'm up there with Santa Claus and the Air Force and my team and stuff. And so that was all really exciting. I was in that role for a very short period of time, though, like 6 months, because one of my friends, Rob, came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm leaving my role as the director of quality assurance, and I'm going to name you as my successor." Now, I don't know anything about quality assurance. I barely know what I'm doing in this web programming gig that I'm in. And all of a sudden I find myself as a director of quality for this, now 360 person startup business, right? Bleeding edge technology. We're about to go public, and do a stock offering and everything. So I'm super excited. I'm all into the technology at this point. And then the IPO failed and we had massive layoffs, and I saw the writing on the wall. I escaped 2 rounds of layoffs, and then I was like, I'm out. And so I went into the consulting world, which I had never done, but I had enough background at this point, 4 years, 3-4 years of real solid IT experience in a lot of different roles, configuration management, systems administration, build coordinator, quality assurance, software tester, web developer. Like I had like 6 of the 8 main hubs of the software development lifecycle kind of proficient, right? So I bolster up my resume, boldly put it out there to a consulting company. And overnight I go from being a director of quality assurance to being a software test lead for a major corporation through these guys that I was contracting to. And my salary goes from $52,000 a year to $190,000, like overnight. So I'm instantly just oozing with excitement, and I'm all about the numbers at this point. The ones and zeros are all it's matters. We're coming up to Y2K, and like I get involved in this other company and the Y2K planning initiatives, disaster recovery planning, strategic risk analysis, all these SWOT, all these things that you maybe you hear about or you don't. So I go through this career, jumping from consulting gig to consulting, different companies within a consulting company or different consulting companies, because now my skill set has evolved. I'm like 10, 12, maybe 15 years into my career, and my resume is 7.5 pages long. And I can't leave anything out because I have everything on there, from COBOL programming to the most modern, whatever the web design thing is that's out there today, right? And so I can't omit anything because it's what makes me marketable. And I'm picking up job offers from, Department of Defense contractors. I formed an LLC of my own at one point and bid on a contract at the Air Force Academy and hired a team of 20 people so they could all do that work. I was still working another job, making a paycheck over there, and I landed a contract at the Air Force Academy for $2.6 million, right, that I used to fund my team and everything. So I'm like, my head's spinning at this point. I get jobs as database analyst. I start getting into data analytics. I love numbers. I find out spreadsheets, and I start going into these roles as a master data management expert, right? I'm working for companies like Hertz Rent-A-Car and Budget Rent-A-Car, and they want me to take all of their data and aggregate it down into a golden record, and I'm just heads down, geeking out.
Yeah, so your tech bona fides are there. My goodness. Which is so now you found Christ. I think you said you put together an event. I remember you telling me you put together an event where you spoke, and people were totally moved. And you had written a book. I'm going to put that up. The power to change.
Yep,
and so people are finding you now. You're a Christian, you're a believer, and so is that what led to Ask Craig?
Yeah, it was that same story. The book, people finding me. So I appeared on that one guy's webcast, and he's the one who kind of gave me the brand name. And then I did an event here locally, just at the public library. I had asked a couple of my friends who were also Christians, one who was a comedian, another guy who was a promoter, and a fellow musician who I had played music with. He was a dueling piano player. And so we all got together and we decided we were going to put this event together, and we were going to talk about, I called it networking with a purpose. And in my mind, I guess that came from God, obviously, but it was in my mind. It was like, let's just all get together and see what happens, right? And I say that a lot to people now. I say, let's see what God's up to, right? So the three of us got together. We had some kind of a loose format. They had really great presentations they were going to do. Up to like 60 seconds before I walked on the stage, I had no idea what I was going to talk about. I got up there and I basically,
that's a heck of a speaker who can do that.
Yeah, I asked the Holy Spirit. I said, tell me what to say. Like I just want to be a vessel, right? It was a Corinthians talks about being a vessel of honor, right? So it's Timothy. I think it's First Timothy. So I wanted to just be that vessel. And so I got up on stage. I shared my testimony. I talked about my rock star time and my divorce and the drugs and all the stuff we already talked about. And then at the end of it, I was overwhelmed with this amazing power and authority. And I just felt audacious enough to say to people, I want you to just ask yourself this question. Why are you here? Not why are you here in this room? Why are you here? What's your purpose? And the whole event tied together at that point, right? It just became like the networking with a purpose title made sense. The effect on the people afterwards, like you said, I took 36 separate meetings after that event. And it was everything from business to life to faith. I sat down with several people and gave them the gospel. I believe a couple of people ultimately, were led to Christ through that conversation. So I was just extremely humbled by having that event, and it became the catalyst for what Ask Craig T is about now. in terms of how I run my business, right? There's the mission and the vision, but the underpinning of the whole thing is my tagline is business built on faith, right? And so that means different things to different people. But for me, that means I'm going to live a Christ-like life as a business owner, as a person, as a father, as a husband. Like all of those things are pinned up on that idea of faith.
Yeah, and so I want to show your website here, and hopefully you can see it as I show it. Um, let me see. We'll go into present mode, and I'll share my screen. Allow. Okay. Can you see that? Can you
I
see?
can. Yeah.
Okay. So here's your website, AskCraigTee.com, and that's just um, I guess done because you couldn't do Ask Craig just T.
Actually, there's actually a little sub story there. So I actually follow another social media influencer. Doesn't have the best control of his profanity, but his name's Gary VEE. And so I did the TEE because I kind of thought that was cool. And it was also a play like on t-shirts. And I was thinking down the road, like merchandise and all that stuff. So
makes sense. And
yeah.
you call it, your slogan is business built on faith, but you have sub brands that you were talking about, and these are them, right? Can you
I
talk a
do.
little bit about each of these?
Yeah, and I'll try to do them in order because I think it's part of the story too, right? So the one that's there that says F4, that's actually back when I did the webcast with that individual, I wound up spending some time in front of my whiteboard and thinking about all the questions that people were asking me from social media. And I wrote them all on a whiteboard, and I remember looking at them and stepping back and going, these are all in at the time, 4 categories. And I didn't know how to kind of put it all together. But as I started looking at it, it was all about money. They were asking me about relationships. They were asking me about health. And then I noticed online that there was this missing category, that nobody was talking about. And I saw these hashtags, and it was finance, fitness, family, but there was no mention anywhere of faith. And I was like, that's the missing part to the equation. And I looked at my list again, and sure enough, there were all these questions about faith. Why am I here? What's my purpose? How can God do this? How can God do that? All those things. So I wrote out what I call my 4Fs philosophy. And you would say to people at the time, I'm Ask Craig T, and I have a 4Fs philosophy, and people always ask what that is. And I tell them it's finance, fitness, family, and faith. People ask why faith is last, and it's because all of my decisions and actions are based on my relationship with Jesus Christ.
That's actually the foundation. Okay.
That is, right?
Keep going with the others.
Say again?
Keep going with the others.
Oh, say, yeah. So I trademarked that philosophy. I obviously created a logo for it. I made a couple T-shirts. I'm still doing some things, and I have no idea what I'm really doing. So, but that became and still remains the foundational aspects of my business. Those principles, if you look at Scripture when it comes to money and relationships and your personal health and of course your faith, there's a roadmap there. And that's really what I tried to bubble up in my most recent book, Godpreneur, which was taking those principles and extracting them from Scripture so people could apply them to their business specifically, so that because people need to know there's a roadmap in the Word that's not just for your life, but it's how you conduct yourself in these 4 categories. So that's where 4Fs came from. The next thing that kind of came up was the Stage 6 sub-branding. It's a coaching division. And obviously, as a coach, I talk a lot about those same principles with my clients. And when I first started out, I was really coaching, even though I wasn't going to be a life coach, I was dealing with a lot of life coach kind of issues, but with the focus of business development. So, hey, I want to start a business. And then you run almost immediately with most people into a limiting belief, right? Or they have things like they'll refer to it as imposter syndrome or whatever. And so Stage 6 became an answer to a lack of framework out in the world. So when I went through my certification, there was a life coaching certification. There are business coaching certification programs out there, but they're like $30,000 or $40,000. And then frankly, they didn't really answer the question of how I would run a coaching business. And they didn't tie to obviously the biblical principles that I held close to my heart. So I developed a 6-stage coaching framework for business. And so I created a curriculum and a program that I could bring in people at the time, bring in a new person like yourself and put you through my coaching program. And I could turn you into a stage 6 certified business coach. That was kind of what that one was about initially, and still exists that way now. But now it's become more of an overarching coaching umbrella for a lot of the education pieces and workshops and curriculum that we do inside of Ask Craig T. And that's not just me now, that's other coaches that I've formed strategic partnerships with. And so we all collaboratively work together to cover those things. So like my chief operating officer for Ask Craig T is also a financial literacy expert. Her name is Jessica, and she actually has her own curriculum that is part of the education division of Ask Craig T, and she facilitates those workshops to teach people how to restore their credit and things like that. So that's stage 6. Kind of in the middle of all that, the technology business coach as a brand emerged, I would say, about a year ago, when I really I stepped back and looked at the business model from a coaching standpoint for me. And I said, who are the people I'm really working with? Who are the people I really want to work with? And the understanding finally, after 30 years of technology background, I was like, why? When I talk to a client, it's like, help me with my website. I don't understand how to do domains. I don't understand how to do CRMs. I don't know how to do social media. And I was like, oh my gosh, everything I'm doing, it's business, but it's technology. And that's
why I wanted you to go into your tech background and how extensive it is, because you do bill yourself as the technology business coach, and it's because you have a legit tech background.
Absolutely. And I looked at the market, and I said, okay, I need to make some changes here. And it wasn't just a matter of rebranding. It was really a matter of addressing a core problem, which is tied to my mission and vision for the company overall. And I was like, I need to address that. And it's simply this: it's education, right? A lot of business owners have software and platforms, especially now with things like SaaS, software as a service, right? Everyone's getting the software, they're spending money, but very few people know how to use it. And I think that that's a deficiency in the software industry. And having been in it for 30 years, I think it's horrendous that a company could morally sell you something for tens of thousands of dollars, in some cases monthly, and then yet go, I'm not going to teach you how to use it, or hey, it's going to cost another $20,000 if you want to use it, right?
So training,
right. And I wanted to address that, and I wanted to do it from the perspective that by educating business owners, right? So my vision is to educate, equip, and empower individuals, business owners, to build the business of their dreams by leveraging technology for true scalability through the transference of knowledge and experience. My knowledge, my experience, I'm giving it to people. I want them to have that ability like I do, right? Now, they're never going to be likely where I'm at because I have all that experience in the background. But if they can get a little slice, right, if that education piece, I had a professor tell me once, you don't go to school to learn math or history or social economics. You go to school to learn how to learn. If you can learn how to learn, you can teach yourself anything. You can do anything. And that's always stuck with me. So as the technology business coach, that's what I'm focused on, is helping businesses scale by leveraging technology, for them to not be afraid of technology. And so this is a big part of my business model currently, because right now with things like, ChatGPT and AI onset, machine learning, augmented reality, where do those things fit in to your business? And so I do a very in-depth.
It's kind of a frightening time, I think, for small business owners and also for Christians, because we're seeming to separate as Christians into two camps with the whole AI situation. And I want to chat about that just a little bit in a sec. Go ahead and finish. Just give me the one sentence for the others, because I want to change the shop.
Got it. So Hope Project kind of came up next. That is a annual retreat and some workshops that we do specifically to offset limiting beliefs, overcoming fears, and how to lead yourself well. I team up with other coaches. My entire staff gets involved. And once a year, we go away for a 2.5-day immersion retreat. It's amazing. It's powerful. We just had it transformations all over the place. And it's not like the woo-woo stuff. Like we really get in there and like break apart your trauma and find points to look forward and all that. So amazing projects. And we have all kinds of on-set workshops that go along with that. Nice. 617 Media actually came up as a joke at a conference I was at, and it's a whole longer story, but the one sentence is, it has become
a business out of a joke.
I totally did. So 617 is the area code that I'm from, back east in Massachusetts. And I was telling a story at a conference to someone, and I was like, you don't know what it's like to live in 617. You don't know what it's like to do, like all this oppression kind of stuff. It was totally a joke, right? And if you can see the logo better, it says you don't know across the top. And you know, and it's got this little hand that's got like a symbol holding up, and it was because this guy was at the conference doing what he called fire breathing, and it was very woo-woo, and we were kind of making fun of him at the same time. But it all came together as this visual, just as a joke, and I made a shirt, and a bunch of people bought them. But now what we've decided to do is take 617, because it's where I'm from, and it's actually the media division of my company. So we have a event space here, as you know, and we're setting up the ability to do 4K TV video productions, and we have lots to talk about there. That's the one-liner for 617, but it is a support element of everything that I do. And then the next one is 719 BNG. That is a networking group. 719 is the area code here in Colorado Springs. And so I'm focused on, with my team, building a massive networking presence for businesses. And it's not traditional like a, and I'm not talking badly about anybody, but like a BNI. We totally spoofed the BNG from the BNI. It's Business Networking Group instead of Business Networking International. And not to say anything bad about any of those groups. What we wanted to do is just something different. We wanted to be able to focus on connecting with people and having just true, authentic relationships and networking without an agenda attached to it.
Awesome. And I know that's on Facebook, and people can join that. Now, I want to go to the homepage of your website because I want to play this video. I love this video. And I think people will too once they see it. So, I'm not sure if the sound is going to play. Let's try.
Yeah, I can hear it.
You can hear it? You can hear it?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. I love that video so much. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, hopefully. Stop screen. There you go. Oh, that's so great, because that's how I feel sometimes, you know, and I'm into the tech, you know, not anywhere near as deeply as you and some other people, but I love this stuff, you know, video, social media and all of that. It's like I have to do it, but there are times that I just want to take the keyboard and like chuck it out the window.
You know? I always say it's a problem that I'm wireless with my keyboard because it's really easy to throw.
Yeah. But it sounds like that's kind of what you do, though, is that you kind of take the pain out of working with technology. So before we go any further, you know, two things. One, I want to just chat very briefly about the whole AI thing, and especially as Christians, because I feel like we are moving into two camps with that, where one camp is like, you know, this AI stuff is of the devil. It's terrible. We need to stay away from it. It's going to, you know, damage all of us. And then there's another camp, and I feel like I'm more leaning towards this camp that says, why don't we as Christians get into the AI, understand it, because it's always people behind the programming of the AI. So if we as Christians can get into it, then we can make it do what we want it to do and make it say what we want it to say. It's about messaging ultimately, right?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to understand when you get into this topic is really have an understanding about AI in general, right? So at a high level, you know, artificial intelligence is just that. It's artificial, right? You got to hone in on the words. I tell my wife, words matter, right? So it's not real. It's not really intelligent is what you're saying. It's not real intelligence. So that's important to know, because what we have in here is real intelligence, right? Our creator gave us the ability to have discernment, right? To use judgment, things like that. So that's important to know. Now, as a thing, you're right. There are kind of a division, especially amongst Christians. And I say to people often, the thing isn't the problem. We're the problem, right? Scripture talks about money being the love of money being the root of all evil. It doesn't say that money is the root of all evil. It says the love of money is the root of all evil. And I think the same thing is true when you think about anything else you insert in place of money, AI, anything else, right? Pornography, TV. I mean, binge watching Netflix, not necessarily a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing, right? The love of Netflix distracting you from your family life could be the root of all evil, right? If you wanted to paraphrase. Right. So I think,
getting close to the Lord.
That's right. So that's one part of it as a Christian. The other part of it is this whole idea of it being from the devil. Let's just unpack that for a second. Okay. You and I as Christians know that God created, say the word, everything.
Yeah.
So if that's true, which it is, God created AI. God created man who created AI. Think about it for a second.
Yeah, he gave us the knowledge and the brain power to be able to do that.
And so going back to people being, inherently sinful by nature, born into sin, is AI the problem or are we the problem? We're the problem, right? The use of anything good will be perverted by man, I believe. It's always true. We can take music and pervert it, right? And that's where you get your, and I don't want to call out a particular flavor of Christianity, but certain people think music is bad, right? Well, is music really bad? If God created it, is it bad or is it how we use it?
It happens in heaven. Music happens in heaven. So.
Right. We were born into the world naked and without awareness of the fact that we were until the fall. So the question is the beauty of a woman or a man inherently naked the problem? Or is it the fact that we have that sin nature and we've perverted it to turn it into something like pornography? So these examples are relevant when it comes to things like AI. Now, from a practicality standpoint, as a business, and me personally as a business user, my entire team uses AI. We generate content for social media. We use it for my video crew uses it for generating questions and shot lists and things like that. So there's a lot of positive ways that you can use something like AI, and we do. Now, there's all these questions about, it's going to take over the world, right? Yeah, I mean, let's be honest for a second. There's a point where I think we have to acknowledge what God's plans might be for us. I don't know if AI is the thing that's going to, machine learning and human augmentation and, cyberism. Like, I don't know if any of those things are going to be the thing that ends the world, but I don't care. Right. And I don't care because God's sovereignty is at play. And so whatever it is that takes down, the fulfillment of what is going to happen, I don't really particularly want to get wrapped up in it's this or it's that. So for me, while I'm here, I tend to focus on, and I encourage others to focus on, how can you leverage the things that you do have available to you, the gifts that God has provided to you, and this is important, to carry out his plan, to do his work, right? So in your business, right, and I talk about this in my book, in your business, how do you manifest, and I don't mean that from a woo-woo standpoint, how do you manifest, fulfill, assist, aid, be part of God's plan by using these things that we have been given as gifts, right?
Yeah, I think me and every founder that we've interviewed so far always end up talking about that. These things are tools. Money is a tool. AI is a tool that we can use to fulfill God's plans and God's.
That's right.
Route.
That's exactly right. I tell people all the time, you have a toolbox and all the stuff that's in it, and you have to pick out the right thing for the right job. And if that's AI for you and for your business, you need to get past yourself and the insecurities that you have and use that tool in order to further the work of the kingdom, if that's what you're doing, right? Whether you're a believer or not, and you happen to come across this recording, if you're not a believer and a follower of Christ, you're still here to fulfill a purpose, whether you realize that or not. So find the tools that help you fulfill that purpose and do it well, because that's all that really matters, right? The tool is semi-agnostic there.
And do it unto the glory of the Lord, right?
Absolutely. Always.
Yeah.
Always.
Okay. So as we wrap up here, two things. So just give me 30 seconds I know I'm a big talker. You're a big talker, but give me
30
like
seconds makes me laugh.
30-second elevator pitch, because at the end of the day, you have startups, you have startup companies, and Ask Craig T is a startup, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, I think you've mentioned that you would love to get investors involved if they'd like to do that. You're probably doing really well on your own, it seems like. But if investors would like to join you, I want to know what the elevator pitch is to investors for Ask Craig T. If you're stuck in an elevator for them, maybe going up in a skyscraper for 30 seconds, what do you have to say about Ask Craig T?
All right, I'm going to give you the super short version because I don't even think my actual elevator pitch is 30 seconds. Um, so Ask Craig T is an education services organization. We have a mission to empower business owners to scale their business through technology, through education, and through awareness. Our comprehensive approach combines education, coaching, and media production to equip entrepreneurs with knowledge, guidance, and tools that they need to succeed in the digital age. I have a proven track record, a scalable business model, and an experienced team that are ready and poised for expansion. And I want you to join us in revolutionizing the business landscape by investing in Ask Craig T and become a part of the journey to empower entrepreneurs worldwide. And together we can shape the future of your business.
Woo, that was good. I love that. That's awesome. And you've got all those
I know he is.
and you did it pretty quickly. I'm proud of you. Good job. Let's do a little breaking news then as we close out of here. What is the newest thing, the latest thing going on with Ask Craig T, and or that's going on in your industry?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that's happening right now for us inside of the company, recently brought on a chief operating officer, Jessica Peterson. Super excited about her. She's actually been part of the company for a couple of years, but we're making it official, so to speak. And I'm super excited to transition some of the operational responsibilities to her. In addition to that, we are opening and creating a production studio here in our office spaces where we'll be able to support events and do high-level 4K TV quality production work. So I'm excited about that. That kicks off August 1st. We should be fully implemented by the end of October. And then I am currently discussing with an individual coming on as a chief marketing officer. So I'm really focused on stepping back into that CEO space and letting other people take control of aspects of the business so that I can allow that expansion to be whatever it is that God has planned for the company.
Yeah, sometimes that can be hard for us leaders. We all have different personalities, and I'm a leader, and it takes a leader to create a new business out of thin air,
Absolutely.
and make it successful. And so sometimes it's hard to let go of that control, but we really need to once
Absolutely.
to hire people and bring people on to take some of the things off of our plate so that we don't go crazy.
Yep, exactly.
Good. All right. Thank you so much, Craig. Oh, what a great interview, man. I enjoyed it.
I'm
I
so Thank you so much.
you. Got weepy with you, learned a lot of tech from you. And man, what a great inspiration you are to people out there as they are moving their businesses forward, as you're coaching them. And let me just put up here the banner. People can get in touch with you through your website, askcraigt.com. Any other ways you
Yeah,
want?
I mean, I don't think a lot of people do this, but I'm going to give you my phone number. It's a local number, so it's 719
Mhm.
745 5600, and you can call or text anytime to that number, and I will get back to you. And I would love the opportunity to talk with you guys and see if there's ways that we can connect and help you grow your business.
Okay, I just put that in the ticker 719-745-5600.
Correct. Yep.
Good. Okay, so people can reach out and you can even text him right there
Absolutely.
at that number. That's awesome. And this is the head, this is the CEO of this business, which is amazing because there's always a lot of gatekeepers for some of these businesses and companies, and you can't reach the main guy directly. But he's saying he's saying you can reach him directly, which is awesome. And so reach out to Craig if you've got a business as an entrepreneur. If you're another faithful founder, Craig's your guy here for business coaching. And then if you're a faithful funder, you can also reach out to Craig here, ask him about his business, and maybe you'd be interested in putting money into his company. All right. Thank you so much, Craig. God bless
Thanks,
you.
Tammy.
Stay in the studio for just a second. I'm going to wrap up here. So we'll wrap up now. So thank you everybody for watching Faithful Founders. I really appreciate that. People can reach us here at info@watchdfe.com. And if you have questions, we're going to be launching Divine Family Entertainment in God's time. I hope we'll be able to do a full launch before the end of the year. That's the goal. And we'll hopefully do a soft launch here in the fall. But there's still some things that we need to work out behind the scenes in developing the platform. That prototype platform is done. It's beautiful. It's amazing. But I want to be able to give users the best possible experience with it. So we're going to take our time and we're going to work out all the issues. And then we'll soft launch it as a beta test to friends and family subscribers for half off at $2.99, which is nothing these days, right? And then we'll be charging $4.99 for when we do the full launch for regular for everybody else. And so I'm really excited to be able to offer DFE at those rates once we launch, and that's intentional. It's low to make it available for as many people as possible. And remember, this is the Faithful Founders program, but we're also going to be doing the Faithful Funders Christian investors show and faithful filmmakers who to promote people's movies and shows out there. So who are Christians and who are doing the work of the Lord and doing it in a high quality way. Okay, let's get rid of the corniness and the weirdness that comes sometimes with faith-based films, and let's do it beautifully. We can look Our movies and shows can look as great and amazing as the world, but our message is going to be completely different. So if you know someone who fits any of these faithful filmmakers, faithful funders who are Christian investors, or faithful founders who are entrepreneurs, people who've started startups, have them reach out to me, info@watchdfe.com, and we'll see if we can interview them and tell their stories here on DFE. Okay, that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. This was a long one, but man, was it good. I hope you enjoyed it and can watch all the way through to the end because Craig is amazing. Make sure you reach out to him. All right, thank you. God bless you. We'll talk again soon.